Coming through, challenge Duel. Hi, Lenny. How dare you? Demand satisfaction.
Sir, your challenge is accepted.
Huh?
I agree to the duel, sir. I choose pistols at dawn.
Pistols at dawn.
Duels are one of the more interesting methods of conflict resolution in Solium Infernum. They were certainly the thing that captured my imagination the most, and I wondered, is it a viable path to victory? Well, short answer, no. Long answer, no. But that's a little reductive and isn't really telling you the big picture, which is sort of what I'm going for here. I'm not trying to imply that Praetor dueling is useless, far from it, but it's just one tool in your arsenal, and if you try to specialize too heavily into it, you're going to find out rather quickly just how much a huge pile of prestige helps when someone excommunicates themselves and starts beating you to death with legions. Legion combat is the backbone of Solium Infernum and is ultimately what it's all building up to, but dueling has a valuable place in the game as well. As much as I harp on about prestige being about as much use as a chocolate fire grill in Murmur's Hearth of Destruction, that's only true past a certain point. Prestige is absolutely needed in the early game to upgrade your rank within the Conclave, something which not only comes with the ability to draw and keep an extra tribute token with each Seek Tribute action, which is the real allure, but also gives you a number of advantages diplomatically over players with a lesser rank than you. Nobody ever said Hell's bureaucracy was fair, just that it was effective. If you want to upgrade your rank quickly, duels may just be the best way to do it. This is because, whilst vendettas are good for taking things away from your opponents, it costs actions to move those legions, attach those praetors, and plot those stratagems. Duels cost one action, the action you use to send the demand. They can be a little more expensive later, if you're doing things like swapping dueling moves or using bribes, but we'll get into that later in the video. Duels are definitely also lower stakes than vendettas. You're only risking a Praetor, while in Vendettas you risk everything you currently have on the board if you've miscalculated your opponent's strength badly enough. But that doesn't mean there are no stakes. Losing a Praetor, especially one with a powerful ability you'd really rather use elsewhere, or one you've invested heavily into training, hurts. So if you've got a powerful Praetor that you've honed to perfection, nobody's really going to bother risking showing up. Not only is this the cheapest prestige you'll ever make in terms of order slots, but it also holds your opponent down, as they keep being penalised 15 prestige on top of the prestige they lose from the duel, each time they decline to fight your Praetor of Doom. But having a Praetor that's so scary that nobody wants to fight them is more of a mid-game concern. If you want to use a Praetor to duel effectively, you're going to want to utilise it as early as possible. Ideally, you'd send a demand on turn 1, buy your Praetor on turn 2, and declare the duel on turn 3. But that's a highly unlikely series of events, and it almost never works out that neatly. So let's go into the mechanics of duels for when someone decides that they do, in fact, want to fight you. A duel is resolved by calculating each Praetor's dueling strength, and the higher number, as is tradition, wins. The losing Praetor is executed. In the case of a tie, both Praetors are executed for the unforgivable crime of being boring. A Praetor's strength in a particular duel is composed of 4 components. The Praetor's level, seen in the top right of their card, the strength of their dueling technique that you picked for them to use, and the miscellaneous bonuses that they may have. For example, from Andromalius's Dark Art, which gives his chosen Praetor a +2 bonus, and if you've bribed the Arbiter and bid more than your opponent, the Charisma score of the Archfiend controlling that Praetor. Praetors duel using dueling techniques. Every Praetor has either 2 or 3 slots for them. Praetors with 3 slots are better duelists than Praetors with 2, for reasons that will become clear. Every technique has 3 components: its strength, its suit, and its special effect. The strength is indicated by the number in the top right of the card. That's how many points it will add to your dueling score when it resolves. Obviously, the higher the better. Next is the suit, indicated by this symbol on each card. The suit can either be skulls, orbs, or serpents, and they counter each other in a rock, paper, scissors fashion. Skulls beats orbs, orbs beats serpents, and serpents beat skulls. If a technique is countered, not only does it not add to your opponent's dueling score, it also doesn't resolve its special effect. Special effects are the final component of a technique. Some, but not all techniques, have effects that occur when they resolve. For example, this Veil of Smoke is something of an insurance policy for your Praetor. They're not banished if they lose when you pick this technique, assuming, of course, that it's not being countered. Every Praetor except 1 comes with access to 2 of these 3 suits when you buy them. This means that they effectively have a suit they're weak to, because they can't counter that suit at all. Let's take a look at Furfer here. Furfa's often considered a decent early game duelist because he's cheap, has access to 3 slots, and has access to Seal of Repudiation, an incredibly good orbs technique that will counter both orbs and serpents techniques thanks to its special effect. Furfa's 3rd slot, however, is Feral Lunge, a Skulls technique, and it's only strength 1. That means that if you're dueling Furfa and he hasn't received any additional training, you should probably pick a Skulls move. Not only can it not be countered at all, but it counters his strongest techniques. Gusion, on the other hand, is a much stronger duelist than Furfa by default. That's because, whilst he has access to Skulls and Orbs too, his strongest techniques are in Skulls, and he even has access to Crippling Strike, which is the Skulls equivalent of Seal of Repudiation, countering both Skulls and Orbs techniques. The only way to really be safe from Gusion's strongest techniques is to use a Serpent's technique yourself, but he's able to counter that with Infernal Orb if he sees it coming. He's probably the 2nd strongest duelist using default techniques. The strongest, of course, is the Queen of the Damned. She's the one Praetor that comes with access to all 3 suits by default, meaning she doesn't have a weakness in the same way the others do, and can always hit the weak side of a Praetor's suits. She's a great pickup for anyone who wants to duel, but isn't planning on investing too heavily into training their Praetors. Speaking of training, let's talk about how we do that. Every Praetor's techniques can be overwritten with new ones using manuscripts, such as this one, which teaches Mind Burn. You'll note that the strength says +5. That means it will add 5 to whatever number was on the technique it replaced. Training only makes Praetors stronger, never weaker, even if a technique is replaced with a technically weaker one. There are 2 restrictions though. You can't teach a move to a Praetor if it already knows that move in a different slot, and you can't replace a technique with one from a different suit. Well, unless you have Charisma 4. Then you can train whatever you like, in whichever slot you like, which means that you can make your own Queen of the Damned with just a little investment into manuscripts. There are also some other effects that can affect a duel's outcome. I mentioned Andromalius's Dark Art earlier, but there's also the Anointed of Ash ritual, which can be performed using the artifact Goblet of the Traitor. This will give the chosen Praetor a permanent, uncounterable +3 bonus, which is incredibly strong. This brings me neatly onto the topic of horrible, nasty, underhanded, incredibly entertaining tricks you can use to win duels. The first is an example of somewhat lateral thinking. A Praetor needs to be alive to participate in a duel. So, if your opponent has an absolute duel monster that you're going to have to fight, and they're attached to a legion, you could always just destroy that legion. This kills the Praetor, and dead men can't duel. You'll win on a technicality, sure, but you don't get extra points for honor. You could also use the Banish Praetor ritual to murder them if they're not attached to a legion, or even use Bribe Praetor from the Deceit tree to get them fighting on your side instead for the same basic effect. There's also the possibility of hiding a move from a suit your Praetor doesn't naturally have access to, assuming you have Charisma 4. Let me show you what I mean. Duels are resolved at the end of the turn, after everyone's actions, which means that if you've activated a manual during your turn to upgrade a Praetor's techniques, the upgraded technique will be used instead of the one you picked. That means if, say, Barbatos here is dueling Mulciber, who, if my opponent is smart, will be picking Demonic Trance to counter anything Barbatos can do, I could queue up an Infernal Blast to train over Barbatos' Splintering Parry, and select Splintering Parry for use in the dueling interface. This will actually use a Strength 7 Infernal Blast at the end of the turn, either massively overpowering Mulciber's own Strength 1 Infernal Blast, or countering his Demonic Trance outright. This technique is mildly controversial. I've seen a fair number of people who hate that you can do this, but it works, and it works well. I recommend you use every sneaky, underhanded tactic you can lay your hands on to ensure you win and your opponents lose. And that's all I know about dueling. Hopefully this has been helpful. I'm planning for my next guide to be about how to set up your economy to ensure your success in the late game. I hope you continue enjoying Solium Infernum, and have a great day.